I did a little something that is unprecedented for me, which is I just created a list of the things that I'm getting ready to discuss. And for each section, each category, I have a person I personally know in mind. And I decided to enumerate the things that I know about them and observed about them and witnessed others do to them or say to them. That leads me to this topic. In a sense, I was a little bit discouraged because although this is an old topic I thought about, I'm glad that it's been about 5 years now since I've had this topic pending, and I'm only now addressing it because I have met new people who helped me organize my thoughts and feelings a little better this time around. And I also feel like I have I don't want to say maturity because my maturity really hasn't evolved much in my time here. All that's happened is my new experiences have helped me express myself better. But when it comes to who I am and what I am, I'm still the same. The biggest difference is that when it comes to my self esteem, I don't have any problems saying what I'm saying and defending it. Whereas before, it was possible for you to bully me into submission, meaning bully me into feeling insecure, doubting myself, not wanting to express myself. Even if it didn't change my belief, it meant that I wasn't willing to share it. I would be more in a shell. For some reason, every time you talk about men online, it's literally one of those topics that for some reason gets people upset. And like I said, this is coming from me and my experiences with people I know. This is not to encompass everybody, but I am certain that because the human population is pretty big, that maybe this could resonate with more than one person. And this is not to represent everybody. This is to highlight observations of patterns of behavior that I can say I have made. So let's get started. I just wanted to also do like a second part to watching myself write because I love to write so much that sometimes I wonder, what do I look like when I write? Does my face change? What does it sound like when I write? And all those things, like that 17-minute video I made of me journaling. Men challenges. Let's start off with the topic that I think is the one that annoys me the most as a category, and that is race. There's no denial that the perception of people based on race is different, and this applies to women as well, but of course I'm going to put my emphasis on men. In my experience, I have observed that white men tend to be perceived as privileged, powerful, for the most part inherently having money, let it be money of their own or money that their family is backing them up with. Authority figures, respected, except for the shift that seems to be taking place in modern days to where men are simply perceived as individuals whose authority you absolutely don't have to obey. You can be dismissive of it. You can even challenge it and even attempt to invalidate it because that's what's fun, given that now the women are the ones who rule, right? And the individual I have in my mind as I think about this is one that I could say all of this applies to, but I'm experiencing the shift of how male figures used to be addressed versus what is being experienced now. And I feel really bad for this person because this is a guy who definitely cares. He works hard. He shows up every single day, unless he's sick to the point that he gets like knocked over on the floor because physically, he's not able to count on his body to do work and such. But this is a person who is reliable and undoubtedly has put the work in to earn everything that he has earned. But of course, if you start knowing a little bit more about him and his background and things, you're gonna be like, oh, well, he already comes from a family that had things such as businesses and stuff. And I'm thinking, well, just because you had a business backing you up, it doesn't mean that you don't have to put work into that business, especially if it's a family business. If that's the case, why would this person need to be working retail with me, someone who doesn't have anything backing her up. Where is the so-called privilege? Privilege does not guarantee that you don't have to put any kind of effort in. It still means that maybe you cannot be accommodated as well as the folks who preceded you were. Just for an example, I'm not saying that this guy doesn't have anything going for him outside of work, but I'm saying that yes, he could count on some support if something happened, but it's not like his family is at that point where they can afford to not be involved doing work. Now, the black man, for instance, is perceived as ignorant, desirable for a temporary good time. In other words, they are perceived as having, I guess, physical endowment that you can have your fun with, but no one actually wants to truly commit and be involved with them in a serious manner. They're also perceived as individuals who didn't have present parents or parents who were influential in the correct way, meaning to be worthy of having marriages and things like that, because that is a population that is perceived as having nothing but broken homes, nothing but troubled people, nothing but attitudinal issues. Another thing I can think of is because they're perceived as poor, they're not as respected. And when it comes to authority, unless they're individuals who exhibit authority, for instance, the guy I'm thinking about is someone who works in the shipping industry, and I'm like, wow, this is a person who you would never try to challenge, you would never try to be a Karen toward, because he will roast you. He does not care. And I think that is a great way to present yourself. But if you're someone who gets offended easily, I can see how you would see him as, look at him being ordinary, look at him being uncouth. And I think that is simply not fair. This is an individual who has probably figured from years of experience, because he has been doing that for almost as long as I've been alive. I overheard him telling someone who asked how long he's been there, because he's recognized as being there for a while, and he said how long it had been. I'm like, damn, that is about as old as I am. It leaves an impact on you. I like that at no point have I ever seen someone trying to challenge him. And when someone starts acting, dumbed down, like the people I complain about in here, he doesn't try to baby you at all. He tells you things the way it is, and he'll repeat it to you. If you didn't get it the first time, it doesn't change the facts. He doesn't play with you. And that is the kind of individual that I will definitely respect even more. This is a person with authority. But superficially, I know of people who see behaviors like that and will label it as, this person is not educated, doesn't have manners. And I think that is just not true. It is not fair at all. And I feel like that is something that is more predominant on a certain race more than others. But I'm not saying that, say, white men cannot have experiences like that or exhibit that kind of behavior and not be perceived like this man. But I'm just saying that it seems to be almost inherent that your preconceived opinion of someone is going to be that. And then finally, the brown category would be perceived as they're constantly working and having a ton of kids. And because they have a ton of kids, they have to spend a lot of their time working. And they could be in committed relationships, but maybe not. Because they work so much, then their partner, depending on what kind of person she is, may get frustrated that she's alone and feels lonely, and like the weight of the kids is all up on her, even though the man is the one going out there to work, and maybe she has to work too, but he's the one designed physically to be able to handle working extra, as opposed to focusing on that and focusing on the fact that the man is being a provider. She can only focus on the fact that her needs are not being met, and that she is experiencing frustrations about how she spends too much time by herself, and it's just the way it is. And then, as a thing that they have in common, I expressed that exerting power physically is something that these three groups have in common. And again, the brown community, I'm just simplifying it. Anything that doesn't fall under the black or white category, the simplest thing to do would be to call them like the rest of the brown population. I cannot express myself about Asian folks because I sincerely cannot say that I know any Asian folks that I'm deeply connected to. I know who has Asian descent, but it's not like I'm tight with this person because we don't actually work directly together. But I'm not exactly bonding closer with this person. So that's why I really don't have much to say in that regard. I have not experienced that for myself to be having an opinion on that. By exerting power physically, it could be something like, well, because you're physically more often stronger, you will probably be more independent. You won't be the one calling for help. You will be the one people call for help. In addition, I feel like across the board, all of them are perceived as having the potential of being too forceful with their strength, for instance. I think that it is perceived as only the man can be the one who's physically overexerting themselves. Let me not say the A word so that YouTube doesn't get offended. Use their force and strength like that, but I'm like, do you also realize that that physical exertion is also a demonstration of how that is the male protective instinct? There are some men who unfortunately do exhibit behavioral problems, that's another thing, where they excessively use that power that they know they have to gain other things. But in other instances, I think that it is important for them to have that physical capability because physical demonstrations do show something, do show power. Would you really want to hire someone who's not very physically strong to do a construction job? No. And at home, I think that we should rely on you. We should be able to rely on you to put a home together. Like if furniture needs to be placed, rearranged, moved, things like that, then you do need to have that power. Now, if you use that power on a person, I think that's wrong, but I think it's right if you're using it to defend yourself, your property, or other people. Now, that is different. I definitely wouldn't condemn someone using their strength for that reason. Now, if you're using it as a means of punishing an individual because, say, they're annoying you or you're having a bad day and you want to let it out, that is totally to be condemned. That is not something that can be excused in any way. So there is that difference. But I feel like it takes one person having one bad experience with a man to be like, he got issues. And I'm like, well, what led to that issue? Because in my experience observing men, they're not out here just being reactionary creatures. Something has to trigger them. When that trigger is there, the primal instinct kicks in. They are beings who tend to be figures of authority, and authority figures maintain order. Maybe that is the way he needed to react to bring back order into things, to neutralize a threat. That's the way I perceive it. Now we're going to enter another category. Fitness. Depending on your fitness level, this man, if he's in shape, he'll be respected more. He will be perceived as attractive. Now, if you're out of shape, you will be perceived as lazy, thus not get as much respect, and you may even get teased for it. Now, for some reason, for the female counterparts, if you were to say something about their bodies, then it's never right. But if you're going to say something, you better say the right thing, something positive, something that's a compliment. But if you talk about a guy, it's okay to talk about them however you want, because it's not the same somehow. And that is something that I disagree with. That is something I don't understand. People, male and female, can have their self-esteems damaged. If you're going to say something nice, but preferably don't say anything. I think that body discussions is something that you as an individual, you need to arrive at the conclusion that you're happy with the way things are. And if you're not happy, then you change whatever you're not happy with. But to expect validation and reinforcement from others. I don't think it's a bad thing necessarily, but expect negative feedback as much as positive feedback. But how about if you don't encourage it at all? I like to not encourage it at all. But that's just my personal preference. It's because I am indifferent. I can go years without getting any compliments and I'm happy, and I can go years getting compliments and I'm happy, but like I said, it doesn't really like do anything to me. It doesn't make me feel better nor worse. Now, by extension, this is not really fitness that you can change and control, but let's talk about height. If you're tall, of course, you're desirable and respected and deemed as attractive, at least when it comes to the height, because it is possible for you to not have a face that maybe other people find attractive, but you happen to be tall. Being tall grants you points no matter what. And if you're tall and fit, you already have points. Even if you're tall, fit, but not exactly super endowed in the face department, you're still going to be perceived more favorably than not. Now, if you're short, you'll definitely get teased and you'll definitely be disrespected. And undoubtedly, this man is going to be prone to feeling a degree of sensitivity about height references and comments, because probably this is someone who has gone their entire life with their height being made their identity. When I think about this person who inspired this note, I'm like, I'm glad that I met this person at the age that I met him, because had I met him probably as my direct peer, like say we're in the same age group, I know that would have set his ass on fire. And for someone who has probably, he's definitely sensitive about his height, but for someone who has been living as such for long enough, then I can see how the maturity has set in from years of experience. And it's something nice to witness. I'm glad that I know him at this stage because I get to see his resilience. But you can also tell that at some point he went through shit. It's just nice to see that he's not like salty or bitter about it. Now, we can also talk about inabilities. Inabilities, I mean to use the D word, disability, but once again, YouTube seems to get offended by that, and I'm not gonna trigger it. But if you are unable, then you will have fewer job opportunities. The dating scene is going to suffer as well. And speaking of dating, you will be perceived as a burden because you're disabled. But disabled women tend to be cared for by their spouses. And of course, their spouses, because of their physical prowess, it will be expected of them to take care of their wives. And of course, it's all cute and romantic and all that. But if it were the wife having to care for an unabled man, I think it's weird that the expectation of her is not as high. And if anything, it's like, oh man, you're doing everything and this man is draining you, but you're handling it with so much grace. He's supposed to be the provider, but now you're the provider. But on top of that, the community is going to open up its doors and be extra for this woman, because of course the woman is perceived as needy and weak and all that. And God forbid if a woman is having a bad day. And I'm not against the community supporting. Please support us. If that happened to me, please help me. I'm going to need the help. And I'm definitely not going to reject it. And I am going to thank you more times than there are hours in the day for it. A man, though, they'll observe him supporting his wife, and there's probably not going to be a lot of interference or a lot of offerings for support because the man got it. But also, I think, to jab a little bit at men, that you have to be willing to accept the help too, because sometimes I feel like there's this degree of masculine pride of, well, I got it, I'll handle it, I don't want anybody else involved, because you might feel diminished. But fortunately, that kind of mindset in men is not one that I witness very often. But I can say I have seen it in some guys, and I'm like, maybe it's because I'm a woman and I inherently need help, and I don't understand why you would rather drive more miles being lost as opposed to stopping and asking for directions back in the good old days when GPS wasn't really widely used as it is now. But it's just weird that if the man is taking care of the wife, it's cute. If the wife is taking care of the man, it's kind of like, oh my God, we need to do something to help the woman push through a little better. And I feel like that energy wouldn't be extended to the man inherently. But that disabled man, I would say, would be seen as more expendable, whereas the disabled woman would be seen as a victim. She needs care, she needs help. Now, when it comes to education level, another new category, you better have it as a man. But even having it doesn't guarantee you respect, especially when you have to compete against how more and more women are educated nowadays. And I don't know where affirmative action is at nowadays, but I remember a time when I saw not too long ago that affirmative action is little by little being withdrawn. It's still favorable towards women, but when it comes to racial, it seems to be like, okay, let's put up some boundaries again. I feel like even when you're an educated man, a man with a degree, you having a degree as a man is not nearly as impressive as a woman having a degree. And I guess it could be compared to an unabled person achieving something, but it looking impressive because they achieved it with their unabled status, and therefore it is more impressive. Let's say that you see someone unabled on a chair on a basketball court shooting toward the basket and landing the shot, the 3-pointer. Well, I, as someone who's able-bodied, could attempt the same shot and make it, and I'm female. But my achievement is probably not going to be perceived as impressive as the unabled person's achievement because of the tool that this person required. So in a sense, I feel like woman with degree is woman with degree. Her achievement as woman is impressive, but man with degree, man has always had privilege and power and strength and whatever else. Not as impressive. This is a guy who put in the effort, did his homework, showed up to the courses, hopefully, because I hear that in college you don't have to show up for classes. I don't know how that works. I've never been. The same input, the same dedication, the same pretty much steps required to succeed at obtaining that paper, and it'll still not be perceived as a achievement worthy of celebration almost. Money, another category. You are perceived as privileged if you have it, like men do not go out there and work for it to earn it, right? And you better have plenty of it because it seems to be the way that you'll get dates. And if you don't have it, then women would find it unacceptable to support you through your time when you don't have money. Now, to reject a woman because she doesn't have money, it would be considered cruel and nasty and all those things. And it is the man's responsibility to like pull this woman out of misery. But what about me? What do I bring for the man? What am I giving the man? In what way do I make this man's life better? It's like, no, it's not supposed to be like that. Like the man is supposed to be the giver and provider for the women. Growing up, and occasionally to this day, I would hear very often women say, well, he gotta be a good provider. He gotta be a provider. A giver. All that women do is take. But at what point do you become the giver? At what point are we talking about what you bring to the table? At what point do we talk about why a man may feel like you are not literally worthy of an investment? It sucks that you as a male, if you want to express those things because you wish to feel fulfilled as well, in the same manner we have relationship requirements, you have relationship requirements and things that you would like to see fulfilled. For some reason, it's acceptable if you are underserved, but you better be overachieving at your serving the woman. And that is something that I can understand why people may find it, when you think about it critically, not a rewarding experience to get in relationships. I wouldn't want to be in a relationship if that's the way that I were being evaluated. So that's why I make myself as easy as possible to get along with. And even if I come off like a pushover, I'm not going to freak out at you unless there's something literally bad, legitimately bad, that warrants that I step up and defend myself. It has to be something that my criteria indicates that, hey, I'm under threat here. Action is needed. But outside of that, just why? Why would I expect a lot of you? That less that I can recur to your resources for my maintenance, the better. But if you happen to be willing to provide in that regard, then great. I shall take advantage of it respectfully and with consideration. But it's not like I want the man to resolve my life, because that is a poor indication of myself as a member in society. I have to be able to fix my shit and at least get as far as I can before someone can maybe intervene a little bit, because hey, sometimes I fall and I need help getting back up. Whatever, that's fine. But for you to depend on that, I think that is a problem. And finally, the last category I had came to parenting. When you're a married man who is a parent, you may be perceived as absent because you have to be out there being a provider. And then the woman does everything. That's pretty much what you hear. You will never hear the end of it. And then if you're unmarried, no one wants to date you because you have the package of you have to pay your kids, and by extension, the lifelong involvement you will have with another woman, inevitably. You're expected to support single moms somehow. If you have your own kids and then you have the single mom with her kids too, somehow you have to make ends meet for the woman, for her kids, and for your kids. And you're only one man with 24 hours in a day and with only so many jobs and how much income you can realistically make. And I think that sucks. And I think that's something that's just not considered enough. You're just considering, well, you're a man, you're supposed to be a provider, so just provide, provide, provide. Okay, how? Provide. Okay, but I couldn't afford an education. Provide. Well, jobs that require certain skills and training, I'm not qualified for. Provide. It's just a lot of pressure and it sucks. And we cannot sit here and pretend that's just acceptable behavior. You're probably more than likely going to be accused of having been the problem person in the relationship, knowing damn well, if you think about it critically, that the deterioration of a relationship is both people at fault. And sure, maybe there's one individual who had more behavioral issues, more management problems, things like that, that may have led to this other person reacting unfavorable to it or created an imbalance on the other person that led to the furthering of the challenges in this relationship, whatever. But it's just crazy that usually when there's a relationship breakdown, oh, the guy cheated. Oh, the guy just wasn't there enough. The guy wasn't giving enough money, or the man. Like, the woman can do no wrong. Not at all. And if she does wrong, it's justified. Well, I had to find somebody else because he wasn't there for me emotionally nor physically. Or, well, I was desperate and I needed the money, and this guy offered it to me if I did certain things, and I did it for the kids. I did it for the home. I did it for the family. I did it because I love them, and all that bullshit. And of course, unfortunately, there are men who are probably going to be more susceptible to poverty, to being broke, because you may have the court also chewing your ass out because they will favor the mother. They will favor the woman, even if the mother may not necessarily be the best circumstance, the best household for this child. And independently, she may have her shortcomings, and those shortcomings are going to have an effect on your kid. All in all, my opinion about men is always going to be, I am going to get to know you first. I always want to meet you first. I may hear of you through secondary sources, I'll give it a listen. I won't really keep it with myself, but I will always, if the opportunity presents itself, if I hear gossip about you, but I don't know you, then I'll be like, okay, that is information that I happen to possess. I didn't request it, but I have it. But if fate has it in its book that we will actually meet, then I'm not going to keep the stuff that I heard about you at the top of my head and let that override anything that you're saying. I still want to get to know you. I want to hear from you directly. Preferably, you don't lie. But if the relationship gets to the point where I feel like we have that confidence and trust between us, I may go like, hey, one time somebody said this and that about you. Just thought you would know that this person is spreading this information about you. I'm not asking for an explanation. I can't deny that I'm curious. But whatever you say, it doesn't have to change things between us because we have made it this far and you deserve to be heard as well. I think my favorite compliment to get pretty often is how fair I am. And I think that it just goes back to my nature about being the biggest hater out here, being judgmental, being very methodical and thoughtful. And I'm just glad that I guess I can owe my fairness for the most part, my objective thinking to that. It's something that I'm never going to let go of because I see the benefit of it. And I also think that it's useful when that is actually used against me, when someone is looking at me, evaluating me, considering me, and judging me and things. I'm like, okay, I know what it's like to be on the judging side, and I also know how to be on the judged side. I can survive fine on either environment. Not, well, I'm the one who does the judging, but nobody better judge me. Nah, in the same manner that I'm a hater, I want you to be a hater toward me too, if that's what you want to do. I'm just not afraid by that kind of adversity. And nobody, absolutely nobody can bully me into submission. Well, there you guys have it. That's it for me. Thank you so much for tuning in. This was a topic that I enjoyed thinking about and writing myself notes about because this is how I used to study and how I used to like brainstorm. And it's a skill that I'm glad that I have, and I feel sad that it seems to be threatened. Hopefully in schools they still teach those things like, hey, whenever you have a thought that's not very clear in your mind, take out a piece of paper, write it down, structure it, and then express yourself. This is pretty much how I would start writing essays too. Like, oh, let me write my points and start like a burger. Top bun, the ingredients and the meat inside, what's going to be the meat, what's going to be the ingredients that the toppings adding extra flavor to it, and then the bottom bun is the conclusion. Introduction, content, material, and then the conclusion. And after I structured it like that, I never had problems expressing myself. And now as an adult, I realized that I practiced that, the cheeseburger visualization, but I'm not thinking of it as the cheeseburger. I'm thinking about it with the substance already. And I encourage everybody to never let go of that skill. And if you don't have it, practice it. It's totally obtainable. Okay, that's it. Bye. Sometimes teachers would ask you in literature classes to, just like math classes, keep your rough draft and turn it in as part of the assignment. Just like in math, they would be like, make sure you show your work. Well, at the end, I would always pull it from my clipboard or pull it from my binder and go,